I can't beatbox. Is that beatboxing? I don't know. Right. We're back.
We're back.
Season 4.
Who'd have thunk it?
Whoop, whoop. Back in the building. For those of you who are just joining us, my name is Matt Davies, the Marketing and Community Manager here at Auroch Digital, joined by my partner in crime,
Matthew, no nickname Walker.
Oh, you giving up on nicknames?
No, I just don't have one.
Oh, right, okay. Just not for today. Is it
But that is the nickname.
No nickname is the nickname.
That's the right.
You've already.
Why do I get a sense that by the time we're done with this season, we're going to be referring to this as Auroch Digital, How to Make a Video Game, Season 4. I think it's going to be that kind of season.
I like
season
that.
4.
Very good. No, very good. That works. It's a good
I'm
angle.
useless at puns. That's about as good as it gets.
Oh, well, you banked that one. You've done it right.
Sticking a pin in it.
So this season's going to be only twinged with a tiny little bit of sadness, Matthew. Well, I hate to bring the mood down early.
Well, I know, but I think we should
probably get it out of the way now. We'll just get into
this.
this. This will unfortunately be my last season here on the Auroch How to Make a Video Game with Auroch Digital podcast. We will talk about this more in later episodes, but I'm going to be moving on from Auroch Digital. New adventures.
Off to the moon.
So again, we'll come to this. We'll talk about this later. So let's get back into the positivity and to the vibe of things. How are you?
Good.
Enjoying the summer?
Yeah. It's been the first summer with a little one. I don't want to keep referring back to my new dad adventures, but it is
part of your life.
Well, it very much dictates my entire life now. So it's been a hot old summer. Some sticky heat with a little man.
Nice.
But what I found really interesting, I was having a chat with a friend, and we were talking about games and stuff. We all talk about games. And he's like, I just don't get the time to play games anymore. I've found that since becoming a dad,
you've had more time.
I've had more time. I have, or maybe I've just made time for it. I've actually
love to speak to your lovely wife. Whether you should have had enough time.
I think I must have gone about a 4-year spell of not completing a video game, and in the last, my son is 10 months now. I've completed 3 games in the last 10 months.
Are you playing them when it's like late night and he's up and screaming and you just need to sit there and just kind of like hold him and be like, it's okay, and you can...
Not really. He sleeps well.
Yeah. So you can play Civ like that really easy because you only need one hand.
Well, that's true. And XCOM is also like that, insert foghorn. But no, it's taken me by surprise. It really has how much time I've managed to find and actually get through a game, finish it, and have that ending to talk about.
So what are you playing then, and what have you managed to complete recently?
Well, very, very poignantly, God of War, which of course has that whole father-son dynamic, and that one did tug on my heartstrings a little bit at times. Cracking game. Yeah. But I was chatting to Nina only this morning, and she's a big God of War fan.
Yeah.
And of course, it's won loads of awards, and it is a technical marvel. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
But one thing I kind of griped with it, the narrative is amazing. I love where it took the character. But in terms of a game, like,
there wasn't much to it.
Well, it certainly didn't feel empty.
Right.
It's very, very, very kind of like A to B tunnel vision. Although there are extra quests you can go off and do if you want to. But it was kind of what I've just played before. It did things anew within God of War, but not certainly within games. But I digress really, because what I look for in a good game, and the reason I finished it, is because the narrative is so damn good, and I love where they took the character anyway. Yeah. So it's kind of split, but mostly on the good side.
Fair enough.
It was amazing.
Do you want to know what I've been playing?
No.
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you anyway.
Go.
Championship Manager 99 2000.
Oh, man.
Thank you very much. I discovered a Twitter account called Dave Black, I think his name is on Twitter. Yeah. But he basically is really into Championship Manager 97, 98.
It's a great game.
And he just plays it all the time. He just talks about it. And then I discovered there's a little bit of a community of post 30-year-old, as I might be, sports games fans who are just playing the old games, and I was like, I'll boot this up. So easy to do. Like, literally took me 2 minutes to get it all set up.
It's not easy to do if you're talking about the method that you've explained to me in the past, because I still haven't managed to do it.
I mean, I've got it running. It's not, it's a little bit of a DOSBox connection, but but it's such a good game. Well, this did come about as a part of a side story because Matt Bone, who we will be talking to in one of our future episodes, is currently getting into Football Manager 2019. And he's playing in the Danish lower divisions. It's a fascinating story. I'll quiz him about it.
I'm always interested as to why does someone go there? You start a manager game and you go there.
Well, he did the journeyman thing. Well, this is a big thing that people do, is they'll log into the game just as a normal, like a jobless manager, and then just try and get a job anywhere in the world.
Right.
So he ended up in Denmark in like the second division. This weird thing. He's off to Chile now. But anyway, it was all a bit threat. And I was like, oh, I really want to get back into it. Sort of bulked at the price a little bit of Football Manager because I missed it in the summer sale. Not that you should only buy games in sales, just FYI. You could buy them anytime. Like you could go on our website right now and buy all of our games at full price. Please do. But I missed it and I was like, oh no, do I pick it up? Do I play it? And then I thought, oh no, I'll see if there's anything else up there. Reminded myself of Championship Manager 90,000.
Great game.
Having a thoroughly good time with it.
Well, that's a good sign of a timeless game. I mean, I've been thinking, well, since you mentioned these old school kind of retro management games, I'm aching to play Premier Manager 98.
Oh, and you've got the box.
I've got the boxed original PC version
and
Prem Manager 99, which had like a virtual soccer style Kevin Keegan on the front of the box, which looks hilarious. But what was great about that game is that after about 15 years when players retire, they just regenerate. You know that player is the new Rivaldo, or Dennis Bergkamp or something, and they're crazy good.
Or Valbra or something.
Just from the same nation, but everything about them is different. It's amazing.
So we should move away though slightly from the games we have been playing to talk about a different topic,
which is
games that have not been made. We're going to have Tom and Peter Willington coming into the studio to talk to us a little bit about the games that we've thought about, but also other games that have famously not been made, like things that people have thought about and made them. So my quick question to you is, what game do you wish was never made?
What games I wish was never
that you played
made.
and you're like, oh man.
I wish you would have given me some prep work before we hit record.
You know me. Do it live.
Hold on, okay, this is really quick. Game that I wish was never made. A game that I wish was never made.
So something you played that you really...
Okay, this is controversial and you're getting me right on the spot now.
Go on.
I'm going to say XCOM 2. Because that means I get 500 hours of my life back.
That's a fair...
500 hours!
Yeah,
I think it's about 480 or something, but we'll round it up.
We'll round it up because,
But what a 500 hours.
I mean, or you could also not make it to then remake it again.
That's true.
So then it can come out and you can waste a whole new 500 hours.
And also, if it's not been made, does that mean, are we getting like some kind of parallel universe where I know it has been made and I can then drop that idea for a game, knowing, do you know what I mean? And then I take all the fame for that game.
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah?
I think that's fair.
It's totally unfair.
I'm going to go with FIFA.
What, the entire series?
The entire series of FIFA.
Oh, wow.
For the very simple reason, right, which is that, as we've obviously discussed already, that we're both sports fans, people think, because I work for a video games company and like football, that I'm good at FIFA. And so everyone insists on wanting to play FIFA. And I'm like, I hate FIFA. It's so boring. I like football management games. I'm a strategy game person at heart.
I'm with you.
So it's like every time it's like, oh, you want to play? Oh, it might be really... I'm like, no, I'm not good. I mean, I'm not good at video games anyway. But I'm also like, can we just not play FIFA? It's so boring. And also, I don't like the community that's built up around... I'm not dissing you here, but it's like, I don't like the vibe of where video games have gone with that. But that's just a personal thing.
Having said that, I hadn't played a FIFA game for a long time. In fact, the last one I bought was FIFA 10, which I was dope at.
Yeah.
Okay. But then I bought, I think it was 17, 18, where they introduced a campaign, like a story mode. And you play as like a young...
Alex Hunter.
Yeah. Which I thought was ace, because I know they introduced that in their Fight Night series, and you had like essentially a Rocky story within Fight Night, which was amazing. Really enjoyed it. They did that with FIFA, and I actually went out and then bought 18, or 17 or 18 when it first appeared, purely because it had that. I like you, I'm rubbish at FIFA games these days. So as I say, 10 was awesome, but between 10 and 17, they actually became quite strategic and tactical, and the buttons are just buffoon me now. But anyway, digress.
Fair enough. No, it's a fair point. Well, we should get Tom and Pete, and then we'll actually talk about actual games that weren't made.
Hit it.
Great. So we're going to get on with the main part of the episode, and I'm delighted to say we have two guests here in the studio. So we've had to bring in an extra microphone, and I'd like to introduce Peter Willington. Thank you back again for coming on the pod again.
Hello, it is a pleasure.
And regular visitor to this podcast, Tomas Rawlings.
Hello. Yeah, it's good to be back again. So, although Peter's a much more regular podcaster than I am, although I'm in this podcast more. You're
I know, I do podcasts.
You should plug your own podcast.
Am I plugging it right now?
Yeah, you can do a little bit of a plug.
Oh dear.
Now that you've made a thing of it, Peter, tell us what it is now.
Yes, if you'd like to listen to idiots ramble on about nice things, you can listen to the Staying In podcast. And
nominated for an award. Is that right?
Available
for an award, yeah.
Nominated for an
It was all right.
Available on all the places pods are podded.
All the good
casted.
ones and all the bad ones.
You see, there's that professionalism that you bring to the table.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But we'll bring it back around to the reason why we're here today and what we're going to be talking about. So, the interesting topic, and this is one that's potentially one that's hopefully going to cause a bit of discussion and debate. We're going to talk about games that have not been made. I asked Matthew Walker at the beginning of the episode what game he wished never had been made. So that's we came with the other ones. There's lots in there.
Double-edged sword. That question.
FIFA was mine if you're interested. But I just want to kick off about what are we looking at when we're talking about this? What's the sort of like thing that we're trying to say when we say a game that's not been made?
Well, I think when we discuss topics that would be interesting, I think one of the things as a games developer is if I'm at events or something like that and people ask what I do and I'm a games developer, invariably then somebody says, oh, I've got a great idea for a game. And of course, there are many more great ideas for games than there are games, which means lots of games have not been made. The majority of ideas have not been made. And then there's a continuum then from a throwaway idea that just popped into your head to maybe a game that actually almost got completed and then was just never released. And there are a few examples of those, especially in the days when the physical cost of release was, the big thing pre-digital. Yeah. Because even if you'd spent a bunch of money making the game, you could expect to spend sort of 2-3 times that budget to print it off and distribute it and market it. So in actual fact, there were economic reasons why you'd spend £200,000 making a game and then not release it.
Yeah.
Less so now, but there's still a thing. And I think this idea came to popped into when we were discussing things when a while ago the main guy behind Boss Key Productions, just before they kind of finished trading, he shared on Twitter a whole bunch of game ideas that they'd been pitching around. And I think it was really interesting that people got to see a little bit, under the bonnet of what goes on in the industry, because we produce a lot of pitches and a lot of ideas, and we're actually changing the way we produce our original ideas.
Yeah.
Because as a small studio, getting an idea to the point where a publisher or an investor is going to give you money on it is a big ask, and it's a significant cost. And of course, you don't want to invest that money unless you think that idea is going to work. But of course, the best way to know an idea is going to work is to make it or to make a demo of it. And so that's always the balance we're kind of fighting with.
Yeah. So I mean, some of the examples that were thrown around, these things like the Gotham by Gaslight and various other ones that existed in that.
Yeah, I mean, Star Wars 1313 was the big one that sounds, and ultimately I bet it's the best Star Wars game ever because you've never played it. Yeah. So you imagine it to be the best game ever.
Yeah.
But it sounds cool.
Yeah.
I mean, because that crept out just as was it Disney closed their interactive studio?
They closed LucasArts, wasn't it?
Yeah, LucasArts, yeah, that kind of crept out around then. But yeah, Gotham by Gaslight I saw on an article about best games that weren't made, and maybe they announced or something. There's a comic actually, isn't there? I think it's based on the comic.
Yeah, it's like a different continuity of Batman, I think. The sort of Victoriana stuff.
Yeah, he breaks down his pathway and he's just like,
Which sounds very cool. I mean, maybe they did it in a way, make it with Dishonored or something. Maybe that's a lot of the gameplay they were wanting to do.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, in terms of those sort of like ideas, like how do you think a studio will come up? Because obviously what we have decisions how we make a choice on whether we're going to go with it or not go with it. But how do you think, are we quite standard within the industry? Because we obviously have a number of factors, but what do you think is the main reason people will just trash a game? Not trash a game, or just decide no.
Or just stop working on it.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole bunch of reasons. I don't think there's a standard way of that people make games in the industry at all. And I think each studio will have different thresholds for things that do get made and things that don't get made, and actually different stages, right? Yeah. So, for example, Supercell, they have regularly released games into soft launch. So they've made the whole thing, figured out how to do all of the monetization because they're all free-to-play games, soft launched it into a few different territories. So these tend to be territories that aren't like the main ones. So they don't launch in UK, US. They tend to launch to like Philippines, for example. Right, see how well it monetizes. And then they've canned it after 6 months of being live.
Yeah. And
that technically is a cancelled game because it's never had a global launch. Whereas there's that. And then there's also just the cancelling stage of people put together a 2-pager. So, for example, here at the studio, we've written 2 pages, got together as a group, looked at it, and then just gone, nah, you know what, we shouldn't make that.
Let's just talk about what a 2-pager is. So, as a rough idea for somebody who's never heard of a concept of a 2-pager, how would you describe what a 2-pager is?
So, it's more than an elevator pitch, right?
Okay.
It's almost like you've got out the elevator and gone
more than that conversation Tom's had with Stewie,
gone into the meeting room and sort of said, look, this is the overview of what the game is, and here are some ideas of what the mechanics of the game will be in terms of how they'll feel, and it might even reference other games. So, you know, people might say, oh, it's a little bit like Clash Royale meets the Simpsons arcade game or something like that. And so you'll be able to get an okay picture of what that game might be. And then from that 2 pages, you will be able to sit down as a group and then make a decision as to you'll be able to like ask questions about what that thing is. So, for example, well, do you see this being, if it's not been described, do you see this being in 3D? Do you see it being online? How do you see us selling content on this? How do you see us, you know, do we think this is really big in terms of scope? Where are the risks? Are we the studio to make this game? And you can make lots and lots of questions and do that kind of thing. And then at that point you can say, yes, we can take this further. Yeah. And then you figure out how you then start doing pre-production. Or we say, you know what, great idea, let's put it into the archives and maybe we'll come back to it at another point. Yeah. And that tends to be, because frankly, the cheapest way of cancelling games is having a designer, for example, sit down for a few days, think about what it is that they want to make and write everything down, because designing games on paper is really cheap. Yeah. As soon as you get art, as soon as you get code, you know, you're starting to become, you know, it becomes a lot more expensive and riskier. Yeah.
I mean, so I was working on a concept here of, working on a game concept. It was kind of card game, and it had elements of auto chessy thing, and I was playing around with this concept for a bit in my head, and then I sat down, spent a solid day working on it, wrote the whole concept document out. At the end of it, I was like, this is brilliant. This is one of the best things I've ever designed. This is amazing. But I've learned that, like, now I'm in the throes of it, and I leave it, come back to it after the weekend. I was like, this is awful. Yeah. And so I sat with a couple of the other designers at the studio, because I'd passed the document around to them because we share, and they said, oh, we're going to talk about it. Before they even started, I was like, let's not bother. This is not good. But I'm glad that basically, as Peter says, I didn't pull in a coder and pull in an artist, and they spend 6 months working up this thing, and then it's like, oh no, your original gut feeling was right. This is rubbish.
And sorry,
I was going to say, when you talked about this a little while ago, Matthew Walker was saying when we were doing the Dark Future soundtrack, sometimes you listen to a sound, you do an audio mix, and then you kind of come back to it and you go, bin it.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I think when you're wearing those goggles, or in my case, wearing the headphones, like. What you hear one day in amongst that fuzz of inspiration, it can be quite muddy. It can be kind of blinding until you get back to it the next day with fresh ears in this case, and then you can kind of see in amongst the clouds of it, you know.
There's nothing like a good sleep, basically, to figure out whether or not you're doing
and
what you're doing is right.
The next morning.
And some breakfast, and I think so. You know, doing a 2-pager, for example, that's one thing that might can something. The thing that we tend to find that ends up having games that we have ideas on, or have moved slightly further ahead, tends to be conversations as part of groups, right? So you have different stages of, you know, at some point the designer might just say, do you know what, this isn't very good to themselves, right? Then there is expanding it out to people that we would include as developers. So, for example, we would include marketing as part of that, the leads per discipline, so code, art, design. And, you know, it's when you have those conversations, you start to, you know, interrogate what the design actually is, where things are problematic, and whether or not you can achieve on it, right? So there was an opportunity that we were given at one point with a very big cyberpunk brand to do a game set in that world. Yeah. And it was very much going to be a tabletop game, but as a digital experience. And we decided, we thought it was a great idea. It was a really, really cool thing to do. And then we sat down with all of our leads, and actually, when we started to chip away at it ever so slightly, we decided that, oh, okay, there's a lot of unknowns or risk or different kinds of different kind of elements at play here that may or may not be useful. And at that point, there was a decision made of, you know what, this isn't what we would do. But it's by having your experts come in and talk about these things that you find those things out. Because what's I mean, I thought it was a great idea. I know you thought it was a great idea, and then
but you don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole before
some coder says you're going to need to like learn networking.
Yeah, right.
And at that point it's like,
yeah. So I mean, the reasons games cannot make it, it's like I think most people would assume it's in the quality of the idea.
Yeah.
But as Peter says, actually the scope of it is a big deal. Like if what you're thinking of just can't be achieved with the resources we can muster, there's kind of no point developing it further forward. And obviously we have a range of concepts we develop, some which are small and some which are much bigger and aspirational. And it's not that you necessarily kill it, but at that point you go, okay, this needs a whole bunch of time to figure out.
Yeah. Also, or and there's that thing as well of like, if somebody was to come to us and say, we would love for you to make an MMO. We would think, wow, that sounds great. But we would at that point have to think to ourselves, like, do we want to expand the studio out massively to do this? Because we could, it would be an option. But it's not just the game, as you say, it's not just the game idea that defines whether or not we move a game forward. It's the it's a myriad of things.
To jump on to move that forward a little bit. So like again, if the strength of the idea is very good, like you said, it's not the main point, but it is quite good. And then you have your leads or your marketing person being like, this is massive. This is like, we'd need loads of other stuff. And I'm jumping into another little bit of a question here, because it's like, is there the opposite? Rather than just canning it, are you going, we need to double down on this, we need to get more people in and do whatever else?
Yeah, I think basically the ideas are cheap, the execution, the ideas are expensive, and the longer the execution goes on, the more expensive the idea. And I suppose to give an example, like here at the studio, like if I was like, every single idea I or any other person that has mentioned to me have ever had, there's probably thousands of them. Maybe let's say for argument's sake 1,000 over the last few years. And then talking to a publisher, they reckon like that for every 1,000 pitches they saw, they signed one.
Yeah.
So you can see the ratio there. That's 1,000 times 1,000 ideas.
Yeah.
And that's just amongst the professionals.
Yeah. Okay.
Before, was that 1,000 million? Isn't it? Is my maths off?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Seems about right.
It's a lot.
So
it's a big number.
It's literally 1 in a million actually gets made. And I think the other thing that maybe from the outside you don't quite appreciate is that the idea undergoes massive changes over the course of it being made. So if somebody has the original idea and say this is why basically people don't buy and sell game ideas.
Yeah.
Because even if you said, oh, this is my great idea, it's Dark Souls but with cats.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh wow,
Good
that sounds
idea.
great. Yeah. I'm writing it down, copyrighted. So you make that thing. Over the course of making it, it might end up something completely, by the end of it, it's a rhythm action platformer. Yeah. Because that's where the kind of process went.
Yeah, right.
So
Dark Souls rhythm action platformer cat game. Amazing.
Oh man.
But in fact, I think Dark Souls is a great example of a game that's on paper is very hard to get across why it's going to be so good. So if you said, what's your game idea? Well, it's a third person action game where you've got a sword and you fight monsters. You're like, that sounds like thousands of other games.
Yeah. Also, it's really, 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 really hard.
Really hard. You're like, that's not selling it. Like for me, I think the innovative bit of Dark Souls, one of the innovative bits was you can see how other people die. That was quite cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that had been done before. I think it's in Super Meat Boy, for example.
Yeah.
But that networked idea of you can see how other people die, that was quite cool. But in a way, that game lives and dies in the execution. Like the combat, the feel of the combat, the weight of the combat.
Yep.
If all that's not right, and if the balancing of the game that you don't die immediately doesn't work, then that game would fail.
Yeah.
So. And that might cause the game to be evolved. I mean, I don't know what it was its original concept. And a contrast, another game that's similar, like third-person action fighting game, might be Hotline Miami.
Yeah.
That also you die a lot. But their difference is that when you die, the restart's super fast.
Yeah.
So you don't wait for a long time before you're back in it. Whereas Dark Souls, the restart isn't super fast because you've got to go back and pick up, missing souls and you spawn back in at a certain point. But the balancing means the dying is part of the experience, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and a lot of factors. A game that might be made today is a game that wouldn't have been made, a few years ago.
Yeah.
And likewise, like there will be some games that are being made now that in 10 years' time you just will not pick them up, right?
Yeah.
So the industry is constantly talking about the death of single player games and games becoming service, and whether or not that where that goes eventually, who knows? But like at some point it becomes trickier to try and sell single player only games, right?
Yeah.
And you can see this very, very clearly in the work of Psyonix.
Yeah.
So they've essentially made Rocket League 3 times.
Yeah.
And only on the third one did they get Rocket League, right? Yeah. So the Supersonic Hyper-Powered Battle Cards, or whatever it was called, which was on PS3, was the second game. I think that they did one before that, which was very, very similar. And they've continued to have similar ideas of what Rocket League actually is, and you go and play them, and they all look quite similar. Yeah. It's just that it is only a combination of, well, now there are lots of people with internet, there are lots of people with connected consoles. Internet speeds are high end enough. The consoles are now powerful enough to do this at 60 frames a second. Yeah, right. And internetworking between different console versions and PC. All of this stuff, and an appetite for like DLC and like all of these things. And that is the thing that made their third attempt really, really good. Yeah. Right. And so I guess that just goes to show that like there are so many different factors as to why a game might be successful, and whether or not you think a game will be successful is also an indicator of whether or not a game is going to make it through the green light process.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that green light process, because we obviously, like we were saying, come up with ideas. We have to run them in, do them in and out. So one of the things we've been looking at recently has been community. As an idea, and community involvement and community-led stuff within games. I'm happy to talk around it a little bit more to give us a bit of a flavour, but like, what are your thoughts on involving a community and involving people within stuff
in development?
Yeah, in the early stages, and this is like when a game's not,
Well, we've been experimenting that a bit. So the studio, we got some funding from the UK Games Fund. Thank you very much, to help us develop a concept called War Striders, and as part of that, they basically put a list of all the games they funded in the public domain. So even if we didn't want to talk about that game, that's out there. So it has. So we kind of lent in with that and said, oh, fine. In fact, you ran, we did a community survey on that. Yeah,
we put out a survey to, loads of different communities talking about...
This was Strider, wasn't it?
Yeah, War Strider.
Strider.
And I think for me, one of the most interesting things came back from that is not so much because... We talked about, if you say to people, what is it you want? Then, there's that Henry Ford adage that people just say, I want a faster horse. Yeah. They're not necessarily going to envisage the innovation that you're asking for, because if they could, they'd be doing it. But you can get a sense of things that massively impact the development. So a good example would be multiplayer. Yeah. Loads of people ask for multiplayer. Yeah. The question is, do enough people ask for multiplayer to make it worth your time to develop it? Now, if your game is Rocket League, it's kind of essential. Sure. Yeah. It's part of it. So it's a given. But if your game's not Rocket League, if your game is, say, a game that doesn't
Broken Sword.
Yeah, Broken Sword. Yeah. And so where's the multiplayer? Well, it's like, if you don't see its core of that, but then a way to do that is to reach out to your community of people who like point and click adventures, and then say,
do you want multiplayer?
Do you want multiplayer? And if they're all coming, if their response is middling to low on multiplayer, given it's probably the most expensive thing to add in development, well, there's no point adding it. Like if your community comes back and you ask them to rate which of these things matter to you, and they come back and go, well, the thing that matters to us is an extra save slot, and then fourth on the list is multiplayer. Well, have as many slave slots as you want. But then that they are helping to shape it. So not necessarily shaping the idea. I'm genuinely interested in how we could. I would like to figure out ways where we could seed ideas into people at an earlier stage and gauge the reaction to it. But again, it's harder, not just because it's in a way you're kind of revealing what it is we're working on, which if you get a lot of hype for it and it's like, when's that thing coming out? Well, we don't, it's still a long way off from us, even getting to the point of making it. But in addition to that, we let other people know what we're working on. Does that mean another studio who, I doubt they'd necessarily just steal the idea, but they might be working on something similar. Yeah, and they might accelerate to get to market before us. Yeah.
Well, like you look at something like Rami, who did who's at Vlambeer and did Ridiculous Fishing, like showed off screens of Ridiculous Fishing, and then some knockoff merchants basically came along and did ridiculous fishing before he'd launched it.
Yeah, right.
So if you talk too early about a game and your idea is straightforward, I'm using air quotes there, enough, somebody can come along and just nick it. However, yeah, I mean, like, involving the community is a really good idea because ultimately they're the people who are going to buy your game, right?
I suppose it's involving the right community as well. I think that's the important point, because like we're very fortunate that the lovely people listening to this podcast and the lovely people in our Discord and the lovely people that we have involved in our games. I mean, we're quite fortunate that Auroch Digital does have quite a nice community of people who are genuinely quite interested in providing quite constructive feedback to us and quite constructive points of view and being able to help develop and build our games. I also know that from when we've done some of our external stuff, we have got some rather wacky responses and stuff from people being like, you need to basically do everything I want, otherwise I'm not giving you £5. And it's like, okie dokie, no, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's a good example in that of with Dark Future, right? So we know that in our community there are people on our Discord that are talking about our games, and they have really cool ideas about what that thing is actually going to be. But I think they're also savvy enough to know that we're a small studio in Bristol, and so when we have like nice folks like Conrad and Granite Penguin and all this other lot saying like this would be really, really cool, I think they also temper these expectations with like maybe that team of 6 isn't able to do X, Y, and Z. But it's also some of the stuff on the flip side of that, some of the stuff that has been requested by them has absolutely been done. So again, like Ogre, for example, when we were doing that, a lot of the community came back and said, oh, we would really like this, this, and this, and this. And like, we were like, you can't have that, you can have this, you can have this. And I think that when you are actually able to filter out the noise of, so Dark Future is a really good example where we had some people where they were just like, it's just nothing like the tabletop game, you should make it more like the tabletop game. And it was like, well, we ain't going to do that because it's going to be another 3 years. But then you also have people say, like, I would really like a countdown timer on an action button. And we're like, that's really cool. And we hadn't thought of that. And that's really valuable. And what you then see is in our Steam reviews, you actually see people then mention some of the things that our community have mentioned. Like, oh, by the way, I really like the fact that you can do this, this, and this. Like, that's really cool. And you're only going to get that when you have, like, when you run an alpha, when you run a beta, when you have the game that's out there in early access or full release or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, my ideal scenario is that we had a big and active enough community that we could like start talking about really early stage, like, hey, here's 4 ideas we're thinking of working on. And then we get people to vote on it and give us feedback. And then the idea that wins goes forward to the next stage, And again, so why don't you just do that? The difficulty is because it also, whatever idea we do has to not just resonate with our community. It has to resonate with, ideally, several tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other people, enough for them to shell out the cash for it. And I think is when you're into nerdy stuff, it's very easy to come up with nerdy things that you get excited by.
And you can let your enthusiasm run away for that project rather than focusing on the raw detail of it.
So I mean, like, for example, like, I would absolutely love Sega to put out a port of Wild Riders, right? It was an arcade-only Naomi 2 arcade game, right? And it was going to come out on PS2, because I have the OPM issue where they said it was going to come out. And they canned it right at the end, right? I would love a collection of Naomi arcade games made by Sega. Now, the thing is, I am way into that stuff. I know for a fact
you're the only one.
I'm the only one.
Okay.
Right? And I think it's the same with, when you get into that, it's like I would think, oh, you know what? If you could, the Spike Out trilogy, you should totally put them out again. But like, to the 2 people who are listening, like, Spike Out, we're the only ones that care. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
And I think that's the same with when you're actually developing games. There's this idea of like, oh, I'd really love to see this element of it, and we know because we've spent a lot of time, or we've done market research, or we've produced similar things before. We actually know how useful those things are, and whether or not they actually shift units or not. I think the classic example is that we always talk about is Linux, right? So like, we'll also always have people say like, it'd be really cool to have Linux. And we're always like, like the numbers just do not make sense. And I think that's the same very early on in terms of like idea generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, people might come along and say, I really, really love this idea. And it's like, just too niche, for example.
Yeah, and then that's our challenge. How do we get the idea that excites us, it's interesting, we can build playable gameplay on it, but we feel like there's enough of an audience. And there's a lot of, you're balancing a lot of competing, which is why so many games don't get made. Because I think that the threshold to succeed is high, but the kind of the reason to can is got to be trigger easy. You've got to at any point you got to, this just isn't working. And so that's why you but the other one is like success is the big reason that either games don't get made or do. So I used to work at Pivotal Games. They did the Conflict Desert Storm series. So a good example of a game that was in very early pre-production, just ideas really being thrown around within the design team. So the Conflict Desert Storm had done well. Conflict 2 had done well. I think this was when we were working on Conflict Vietnam, and that there was an idea to do a Second World War version of that game, which I think would have been really cool.
Yeah.
And we were throwing around a lot of interesting ideas around your part of the marquee, so the kind of guerrillas fighting in occupied territory.
Right, okay.
So it would have taken a kind of different slant on the game series. But then, stuff happened within the commercial sector. I don't think Conflict Vietnam performed quite as well as they were hoping. And then that kills that, that changed what they were doing. And then I think Modern War had come out, and I left the studio then. But
Denied Ops was the one that
Denied Ops
went up against Modern Warfare, didn't it?
Yeah.
And it was just like a bloodbath.
Yeah. Well, there was such different games. And again, you couldn't make Conflict games as had been made post Modern Warfare because the market
shifts.
Yeah. So if you'd have been a studio that had a similar game in development, you might have gone, oh, we're going to have to can this or whatever. But, you see this quite, I mean, sometimes people approach us about games. So we got approached by a wind power magazine, for example. We were doing news games. They wanted to do some little games about making wind power and stuff like that. I was really gutted that project didn't happen because it's like I'm quite interested in energy and energy generation, different ways it's done. That's kind of real shame. But another example of a sequel we did make. We made a sequel to Chainsaw Warrior. Yeah. Which again you can go back to the podcast.
Yes, we did a full deep dive into Chainsaw Warrior and Chainsaw Warrior 2.
Yeah, but when we came to make the sequel, so we, Chainsaw Warrior had done all right. We made some money out of it. And we're like, let's do another one. And there is actually a sequel talked about in the manual of Chainsaw Warrior in the original, Stephen Hand's, and it's a cool idea. It's kind of like Nazi zombies,
right?
Remember that was written in like 1989.
Yeah. Okay.
So that idea has been done quite a bit since, and it's still a strong idea. But I wanted to do something a bit different. I wanted us to do our own thing with it. So we ended up setting it in the Mayan thing with Lords of the Night. So there again, there's a game that got made and a game that didn't get made within the same sort of flip. And I think that, for me, the challenge that we have as a studio, it's always going to be that, because creation of new, what we call IP, intellectual property, that's the thing we really want to be doing, as well as like the partnership projects and that we do. I love as well. Like I'm constantly excited by both. Like, I love the opportunity to work on interesting IP. That's always exciting to shape your mark on it. Like, super proud of the work the Dark Future team did. I think that was really exciting. But it's also exciting to do a new thing. But then it can be so open that you're like, right, let's do a new anything. And you're like, okay, I don't know now what to do.
Yeah.
Monkey tennis.
I mean, I'm on board. Let's go. What are we doing a podcast for? Let's do monkey tennis or that weird cat Dark Souls thing we were talking about.
The cat Dark Souls thing.
So
it turned into a dancing game.
I think it would be a genuinely interesting thing to try and figure out a way of doing things. Somebody told me there was I wonder if you could even do a thing. I mean, in a way, that's what Kickstarter is. I suppose that's what Kickstarter's become, which is like, I've got this great idea.
Yeah.
Here's my idea. Would you like to back it?
Yeah.
And in the early days, Kickstarter for games absolutely was that. You could stick up a game design document, a few pictures, you could get the money to do it. The problem is, as Kickstarter's evolved and the profession has evolved and the market's evolved and lots of projects have not delivered, so it's understandable that people have got a bit... What you need to do on a video game now to get a successful Kickstarter, the bar's much higher, and in fact, it's higher than what we'd have to do to pitch a game to a publisher.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in a way, it's not an easy route anymore to doing it. Yeah. But again, if people listening give us feedback, I'd be interested. I wonder whether you could use a Kickstarter to do the demo. You still get something playable at the end of it.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, you know what? Give us the money to make this demo, because they're still expensive things to make. Like if you've got to put a team on something for 2-3 months, that is thousands and thousands of pounds worth of
there's been a couple of Kickstarters that have failed, right? But the community that they've got around them have still gone, can we do something? Can we like pay for this? And it comes back to that community aspect where they then go, look, okay, actually we'll give you, if you pay us all, like again, now this is the trust with the company that you're working with. Someone goes, give me 40 quid and then we'll make sure we get early access, and then we're like, bye, see you later. That's happened before in the video games industry, sure. Yes, quite a few times. But then if you have someone who's done quite well, I'm trying to think of the one that it's Kingdom something, I can't remember the name of it.
Kingdoms of Amalur?
It might be. It was a French studio. I'll find the name of it. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
have a look at. But their case study was that they ended up selling 2 million units afterwards.
Right,
you know, so it's like because it.
Oh, you're thinking of Kingdoms that Raw Fury published?
Maybe is it?
Yeah, because that
just called
failed at
Kingdoms?
Kickstarter.
Yeah,
but it's gone on to sell really well. I don't know.
I don't know if it's apologies if I.
Yeah, it's a great game. Yeah. No, it's a good example. Yeah, they failed at Kickstarter, but it's been really commercially successful.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not necessarily a guide. And I think the difficulty is that to get people to sign up on the Kickstarter, there's a kind of big degree of trust. And obviously, as a studio, we have done multiple Kickstarters, and you know, we're just about to deliver on our 4th.
Yeah. 4 for 4. Ding ding ding.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd love to be able to use Kickstarter to do demos, but then of course somebody's saying, well, if I'm paying 20 quid and all I get is a demo, what's the point in that? You could say, well, if we get the full thing, you will give you that. But then that's a very big promissory. But then that was kind of the point of Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Was not as a product delivery service. You know, it was, here's an idea, help me see it through.
Yeah.
I think the other thing as well is that, you know, as we've said before, you know, we're a relatively small studio, and our audience has always traditionally been quite niche. And the good thing about that is that the community members that we've accrued are, you know, super into the thing, you know, really nice, and they're just, you know, they're pleased to see the fun things that they like, you know, being made. And I find that really, their feedback really useful. I think that as the studio continues to grow and, you know, continues to make better and bigger and even more commercially successful games, I think we'll grow that audience quite a lot more. And at that point, I think that's the point at which you have, you know, you end up with the Double Fine effect, where, you know, I'll just buy any Double Fine game, right? Because like, I'm just a fan of whatever they touch, I'll just buy it. And I think that eventually you can turn into a studio that can do that kind of thing. And I think at that point, you know, the community feedback side of things can be done like really, really early, because you're essentially making a game for an audience that is kind of already there. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that the studio will do as we keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll finish this section off by asking you both a quick question. Well, and Matthew Walker, you can answer this as well, obviously. But can you give me an idea of just any thought that you've had of like a game that you almost feel either would be a dead cert that you've seen crash in the water, or like be cut up really quickly, or something that should never have been never have been canned, that you like, that would have been gold, that would have been actual gold. Could be one of ours, could be something you've seen before. Obviously try not to break any NDAs that we may or may not have with people.
Yeah,
a tricky one to answer.
Yeah,
it's like,
So
I'll give you my. Shall I give you my one?
Go
That'll
on.
be a good one. So okay, I'm a big fan. I only discovered this the other day from talking to Mike Doyle, who is coming up in one of our later episodes. But I'm a big fan of puzzle games, like puzzle block games that drop down. So one of my favourite ones is Puzzle Fighter.
Sure.
If you remember the Puzzle Fighter game, the
Quality,
drop down. So brilliant game, absolutely amazing. So you had this big launch with Capcom, going to say we're going to redo the game again. It's coming to mobile. It's going to be amazing, and I got super hyped for it. I was like, yes, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be really, really good. Came out for a couple of like weeks, so it did actually launch. And then they went, and the studio went, no, we're doing another game now. We need all the programmers and everyone else, so cut it, get rid of the game, and they just trashed it. And it was already building a little community. The artwork was beautiful on it. It was the same game on mobile. I literally would never need another video game again. I would just have that one. Maybe that's why they canned it, because you know they knew they were only going to make a certain amount of money out of me. But that is the sort of product that I can see in my head. I was like, that would be a good game in this market, in this mobile era. That game would work really well because it's got that multiplayer element to it. You could even probably do a Tetris 99 style. Here's 100 people playing online in this one thing, and there's blocks dropping all over the place, you know? So that would be my one. That would be an example of something that because I still can't fathom why. Now, obviously, I think it's just the main reason that the studio didn't think there'd be any money in it. But
I think for me, it would be it would be a fourth Skate. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Keeping on brand.
keep the faith. Keep the faith. I mean, hopefully they will announce it at some point. But as far as I know from the conversations that I've had, like, it doesn't seem like there's any faith internally at EA that would be a game that would make money. Yeah. And it's a real shame because the number of companies that have come afterwards that have attempted to do games that are basically just Skate. So, for example, the latest one is Skater XL, and it's just Skate 4. Like, it is, it's a fourth Skate game, and it seems to be doing really, really well. I guess the games for me like that are games with very big brands and very big companies behind them that I think, I would really love another big AAA experience like this. Yeah. But the counter to all of that, and I totally know why these things aren't getting made, is because somebody at that company is like, for us to greenlight something like this, it isn't just a case of like, we will make money.
Yeah.
Those kinds of levels of games need to make factors of profit, right? Okay. It can't just be the risk of like, let's tie up 600. Right, exactly. Like, we can't tie 600 people up and break even. Yeah. It needs to be like, we need to have like a team of 600 and we need to make like
double what they're worth to the company.
Oh, even more than that, like 20 times like the amount back, right? Okay. Like, so like that's why your Assassin's Creed keeps getting made every year, but it's also why Watch Dogs took a bit of time off.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Because like they were like, ooh, okay, this is done all right, but like we need to really figure out what that next one's going to be.
Yeah, I think so. For me, There's a lot of IPs that I think have done good things and then haven't, because they sit in that twilight zone where maybe they have been a bit profitable but not enough, and they don't really get any traction. So two that spring to mind that I love. So Splatterhouse, which was a fantastic arcade game.
Great game.
Splatterhouse 2, which is great. And then it got a reboot, I think it's 2010, I want to say. It got a reboot, but they made it as a kind of 3D game. And it didn't really do it for me. I wasn't very happy. And that in a way, that's killed that. So I was super excited when I heard they were remaking it. Gutted that it wasn't the game that I thought it should be. And then basically I can't see anything happening with that now.
Yeah, right.
Like who's going to get this obscure IP and like, no, let's go back. So if you're listening and you want to let us do something with the IP, if you're listening, you want to let us do something with the IP, then that would be great. But the other one would be Dead Space.
Yeah.
Because I think Dead Space, they did some really innovative stuff with that. Like Dead Space was great.
2 was good. Third one had co-op.
Yeah.
I think that's what probably killed it as well. I mean, one, especially from an audio point of view as well,
incredible,
so immersive,
incredible.
It was so atmospheric. 2 was very much the same, and 3 became just kind of quick.
It's very difficult to feel scared when your mate's going quick over here. Oh, it's brilliant, love it.
I remember when I used to do some work for a community radio station, and as a feature, I had my now wife Katrina play. It was that good. Right. I had a non-gamer play it just to get her reaction and record it.
Yeah, right.
Because it was so scary, so frightening.
Yeah.
But just for me, I mean, Thomas mentioned 1313, the Star Wars game.
Yeah.
I was disappointed by that. I'm a big Star Wars fan, like probably half the world. Yeah. But it just looked so polished, so finished. I was just really disappointed why Disney just came in and said, not doing that. And yet there was a trailer released recently for their upcoming third-person Jedi next game. Looks kind of much the same, just with a lightsaber. So I'm thinking, well, what is this game besides a Jedi? Okay, different abilities. What does that do differently? I wanted the grubby underworld. I haven't played that. I wanted that. But the one that did come to mind just now was Medal of Honor for PS1 and PS2. I was a big fan of those games.
PS1 was great.
When Call of Duty, again, Modern Warfare, started raising the bar, EA just kind of went, we're not going to compete with that.
Well, they tried.
They tried. The modern take on Medal of Honor, I thought was actually okay.
That first one by Danger Close was pretty good.
But it's much more emotionally engaging for me. Medal of Honor, it always has been. Call of Duty is kind of technically it's a great game. It's a bit mindless for me.
Yeah.
Medal of Honor
outrageous.
I'm sorry,
that new Medal of Honor,
but Medal of Honor was top notch, and I was so saddened when I heard that was getting shelved, and I'm hoping that will come back at some point.
Well, that was a thoroughly interesting debate. Peter, thank you very much for coming in. Really do appreciate you giving me your thoughts. And Tom, thank you again.
Thank you.
We'll no doubt be hearing from you very soon.
You will.
And I suppose we better get back into our final bit of the show. Well, that was a very interesting... I always say this, it was a very interesting chat, but it was a very interesting chat.
I feel quite emotional now, actually, because all I can think of is...
The games that should have been.
Yeah, it's Medal of Honor. Like, I haven't thought about that game. You know, like an old relationship that you might have had, or an old... some food you really loved as a child and you hadn't had it. I haven't thought of Medal of Honor for a long time. And yeah, I was really genuinely sad when that got shelved.
I remember.
It's gutting.
I remember having a debate with my mother about this at the time.
About Medal of Honor?
But yeah, because there was one about Pearl Harbor.
Oh, that was Rising Sun on the PS2.
Yeah,
that was a very good game.
And there's that bit where you're in one of the boats.
Yeah.
And you have to escape. And you have to get out.
I think that's the opening level.
Yeah.
Opening mission, yeah.
And I remember my mum asking me about it and then saying, oh, there's another one where you can go on the D-Day landings. And my mum was a bit like... and it came up with that debate of like, you know, should video games be treading on a territory where real people died and real activities?
I think when those games came out, I think there was still, I guess it was maybe a grey area, but I mean, certainly these days, I mean, certainly Thomas and Peter could go into a lot more detail about that. But absolutely, I mean, why can video games not touch base with somewhat taboo subjects?
Which is
they're huge platforms.
This is very much a debate for another episode because we could just get into that again.
We're just winding things down and we're just open it up again.
After the conversation that we had just then. But again, really good to have Pete back in again, talking to us. Obviously a fountain of knowledge. Tom as well, been industry veteran for a long time, so it's very good to have his view on it. But I mean, it's fascinating. And again, we're very fortunate that we do have a very good community who are very understanding, but there are some people out there who play video games that aren't very understanding and don't have a very good view of the world. So it's quite nice to make sure that we get all of that put together. So, you know, anyway.
I'll tell you, just really quickly, what I should have said when Thomas was here, one game I would love to see is The Great Escape 2, banged up again or something. that is
this time it's
that's
personal.
A game PS2. Yeah, that's a PS2 game that Thomas worked on, which I loved back in the day.
Yeah, okay.
And when I found out he worked on that, I kind of
fanboyed a bit.
Yeah, I kind of fanboyed out. It was like, oh
it's
my
like
gosh,
you hugging the XCOM guy.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, sorry, John Broom, all about that. Sorry about that.
So, we got quite exciting few episodes coming up. We're going to be getting a little bit aquatic next episode.
Nice.
Then we'll be off to space.
Off to space.
And then we'll be off to space again.
It's like I was going to say it's a globe-trotting adventure. It's an interstellar adventure.
It is an interstellar adventure, which is very correct, because then we'll be heading into the deep recesses of our minds. So that'll be exciting when we talk a lot about Cthulhu. Mm-hmm. So I'm quite excited. There's a whole jam-packed, stacked group podcast. So if you haven't already, make sure you've subscribed to us. Make sure you've shared it with a friend. You can get it on all the different podcast apps that you possibly could hope for. And I suppose we better say, see you next time.
On to the next one.